Always a privilege to come to Tejpur, to the department, meet you, meet all the teachers, faculty members out there. Uh, though I am working in Nehu, but still I have my roots deep in Tejpur, and the help and guidance from various faculty members is still that we want in our research as well as in our career, and we always get that. So with that, uh, I also thank Dr. Sadhan Mahapatra sir for giving me this opportunity to share some of my work, though we'll not be discussing in deep because there are many students, and we'll be discussing morely about what are advanced materials, different easy ways to synthesize them, which will help them in their project or in future if they want to choose research as their career, and how we can go for their application in energy. So good evening all. So let's start. So today, as sir said, we will be discussing on what are advanced materials and application in energy. So I'm working as an assistant professor and head in charge in the department for a few years. So as we talk about materials, we know that during different ages, from the very old times, people or the civilizations develop based on the materials they use, and the impact of materials in the development of the civilization has paved the path till what we are today. So if we know the importance of materials, we name the civilizations based on the materials that have been discovered and used, like Stone Age, where we use stones, then bronze and others ages are also there, we know history. So based on the materials, the use of energy and impact on the environment has started. But of late, the use of various types of materials in all the day-to-day activity, industry, education, everywhere you see different types of materials being used. So these materials need to be synthesized, and the energy impact or the requirement of energy for synthesis of these materials and use of these materials have slightly disbalanced the energy and environment scenario of nature. So here it is a we are trying to find out ways and means to synthesize new materials, advanced materials, nanomaterials, where the use of energy can be minimized, so that the impact of these materials in the environment in one way or the other may be slightly reduced. So today we'll be discussing about nanomaterials and advanced materials, synthesis of some of the nanomaterials into advanced materials, like mixed phase in titania, perovskites, different types like organic and double perovskites, what are these and how we can synthesize them, functionalized or cut carbon nanotubes, core shell structures, and we'll see how these can be applied in photovoltaics, biofuel production, and photocatalytic activity. So let's start. As we know, if we know the nanomaterials, whenever we talk about different types of nanomaterials, different shapes and this thing, but based on the size and the structure of the materials, they can be divided into 4 types, that is quantum dots or 0D, and 1D, 2D, and 3D nanostructures. So some of the interactions and how they interact with photons is given here, because mainly we are working in the field of photovoltaics and photocatalysis. So this becomes very important when we study. So what one may ask, what are nanomaterials? There are some confusions, but in 2011, European Commission have given a definition where they say a natural or identical or manufactured material, if it contains 50% or more particles in the size of 1 to 100 nanometer, then it can be called as nanomaterials. So it may not be 80% nanomaterial or this thing, still if we have 50% of the particles in nano range, or means less than 100 nanometer range, we can call it a nanomaterial. But if it is less than that, we cannot call. So this is a very important definition and explanation given by European Commission on the definition of nanomaterials. And here on the side, I have kept some perovskite materials, the same material synthesized at different sizes and been illuminated in UV light. They give different colors. So as nanomaterials, we know their properties, physical properties changes slightly as we go into nano range, and at different sizes, the same material can give different physical and chemical properties. Now, since we are working in photovoltaics and photocatalysis, basically a bit of this thing, biodiesel production also, but in mainly these kind of applications requires a good knowledge about semiconductors. So we all know, if we see what are semiconductors, they have a certain metals have certain density of states, whereas semiconductors have slightly different density of states based on the conduction band and valence band and this thing. And when we talk about new materials upcoming, like organic materials, organic semiconductors, there we talk about bonding and anti-bonding states. And when they are clubbed together in a bulk, slowly these form conduction band and valence band. Now what we are doing is we are combining a pure semiconductor with a organic material. So how they behave and how we can study them and how we can design such kind of devices is it becomes very important. So as we all know, in semiconductors we have direct and indirect band gap semiconductors. So this is a direct band gap this is a direct band gap semiconductor here, and this is silicon, which is a slightly indirect band gap semiconductor. And here we can see the holes and electrons. And when we draw a semiconductor band gap, we draw it like this, CV and VB, and we draw it straight like this. So in general, if we plot them, their energy versus momentum, it is not straight, it is wave-like structure. So the band gap is the lowest minima of conduction band and the maxima of the valence band. So this difference is what we call as a band gap. But in indirect, this is just on the top of this, both are on top of each other. But if they are slightly inclined like this, where in silicon it can be seen, so these type of semiconductors are called indirect. So in this case, it requires some energy to excite and then some energy from the phonon in terms of momentum to reach the conduction band. So these are the basic differences between direct and indirect. And if we go through direct and indirect in a much more detail, we know this is the uncertainty principle. So in case of a single crystal device like single crystal silicon solar cell, the crystal structure is same throughout the surface or any direction if we move. So in that case, the delta X value becomes very small. The uncertainty in position becomes very small. And it is while this becomes very small, if we plot the momentum versus energy, we get a sharp line like this, as we have seen in these conditions. But what happens if we take an amorphous material, or we incorporate some organic material or a glassy kind of material along with the structure? So in these type of structures, the distance, if we go through any X direction or Y direction or Z direction, we see the regularity in the crystal structure changes very abruptly. In that case, the delta X becomes very big, means the uncertainty in the position becomes very big. And due to that, if we plot, we will not get a straight line, as we can see here. We'll not get a straight line. Instead, we'll get a blur kind of a situation. So this is for silicon silicon material. We can see this is an indirect band gap. This band gap is 1.8, and the direct transition, allowed direct transition, is of about 2.0 electron volt. So if we take amorphous silicon, or along with the silicon, if we can take some glassy material, this reduces a little bit from here. Since it becomes blur, so it will come down. So in this kind of materials, the excitation is very good. But the problem, though, on this excitation is not only responsible for higher production of power. There are other physical parameters also. But here what I meant to say is, if we can incorporate some amorphous material into it, the more and more excitation can be possible. And after that, if we can collect the more excited electrons properly, these type of materials will give better efficiencies as compared to a pure silicon or any other material. So I hope I made myself clear in it. Let us come to advanced material, how these materials work. So if we talk about advanced material, I clubbed them in three components usually. So if we can change the physical properties, like we have two materials, like we have iron and TiO2. So this is a picture which I have shown of iron and TiO2 in the first phase. It is a physical changes we have made. Inside it is iron, and shell is of TiO2. So if we can change morphology, texture, size, band gap, crystal structure, then these type of changes made them into an advanced material, which can be tuned the physical properties to carry out certain applications. So normally in some other applications, we need to tune the chemical properties here. So it is a carbon nanotube that we have synthesized. On the carbon nanotube, we have attached some of the materials through chemisorption, basically, or by functionalizing the carbon nanotubes. So we can get this kind of a different structure, and this type of materials can be used in various other applications. We'll come to that later. And third is engineered materials. So this is a motor. So normally if we call about or if we speak about an electric motor, which runs a fan, simple fan. So that can be miniaturized to certain extent, but cannot be miniaturized less than micrometers, because they have some wire windings and all these things. So in these cases, we can have certain organic molecules. Okay, so the organic molecules here are given. Different organic molecules are wrapped in different structures, so that they can be operated as a motor. So this is not an electric motor, but it is a motor based on pH. So these are different types. I just gave some example to explain the different types of advanced materials that we can come across. Now let us come to synthesis. So first material, the first material that we will be talking about is titanium dioxide, or in short, it is also known as titania. So there are three types: rutile, anatase, and bruchite. You can see rutile has 2.9 electron volt, and it is band gap. It is tetragonal structure, whereas anatase has 3.2, and bruchite has slightly higher band gap, and it is not suitable for photovoltaic or photocatalytic activity. But here we can see rutile and anatase can be used. Anatase in UV range, and rutile for slightly higher or near slightly higher side of visible range can be used. So how we can combine these and how we can synthesize them into mixed phases, so that they can be used in a proper way. So this is some work which I have done with Professor Samdashi, who is also my PhD supervisor. So this is some work which I have done many years back. So we can see in the same material, if we can have both the phases, means if there is a particle, titanium oxide particle, and there are some anatase phase, and there is some rutile phase. So we'll have what in the junction? We'll have a PN junction, as I have shown here. So how we can make them? So while synthesize, we found that, so this is the anatase phase. This is the XRD data anatase phase, and this is the rutile phase. So while changing the temperature during the synthesis, at 850 we get or 800 we get pure rutile, and at 600 we get pure NRT is kind of pure NRT is at 600 and pure rutile at 850. And at intermediate temperatures we can control the amount of rutile and NRTs, thus making all the particles or nanoparticles, each nanoparticle will have both rutile and NRTs phases in it, and they will behave like a PN junction diode. And when we operate them, the current or the electron will flow unidirectionally, and these can be used in various ways to design a photocatalytic reactor as well as a photovoltaic device like solar cell. Now, perovskite material. In perovskite material are a special type of material. So we have to remember a formula which is general formula. It is given by AbX3. This type of material with two A and B are two legends, and X is another legend. So if this type of formula is given, it is known as perovskite. So there is only one perovskite which is available in Earth, which is calcium titanate. It is natural perovskite. Calcium titanate is found mostly in Russian Ural Mountains, and the structure, when the calcium titanate was found, it was named after the Russian mineralogist L.C. Parvosky. So the name comes from him, and we call these kind of materials as perovskites. Now we can, whatever perovskite we are working on, since the discovery of perovskite, scientists and researchers have synthetically developed various other types of perovskites depending upon their properties in magnetic or photovoltaic or any other properties like ceramics and all. So there are a huge class of perovskites. So we work on perovskites, or we are concentrated on a class of perovskites which are photoactive. Now, why perovskites? Because the synthesis of perovskite is very simple. They have very unique crystal structure, and there is a wide range of atomic and molecular combinations that we can take. There are many combinations. In place of A, we can take many various elements. In B, we can take another set of elements, and we can have halides here in place of X or oxygen. So it is basically a oxide kind of thing. Or instead of oxides, we can synthesize, we can input various halogens here. Then one of the most important part of using perovskite is it is very cost effective, and the energy requirement or the energy intensive processes for manufacturing of silicon or other semiconductors, with respect to that, its energy requirement for synthesis is very less. So these are some of the properties of perovskites, why we have taken perovskites into it. Now, how we can synthesize perovskite? Suppose for A and B, we can take any lanthanum or chromium, zinc, or titanium, anything. So normally what we take is, whatever perovskite we need to make, we take the nitrate of that particular salt into account, and on the other hand, we take one organic acid. Now, if we take an organic acid, what will happen is that we'll have a mixed type of perovskite. Means the perovskite will have an organic component and an inorganic component. So these type of perovskites, if organic inorganic combined type of perovskite we can make, so they have different types of, as we have already discussed, combination of organic and inorganic compounds can be combined. So if we don't want to take organic component, instead of organic acid, we can take some other nitrates and combine them. We can grind them, precipitate them, and it is a single step process. It is very easy and single step process. So here, just by combining them and keeping them into a furnace, we can just, in a single step, we can get the perovskite whatever we need. And about, as we say, energy, it is not at all energy intensive process. You can see it is dried at 75 degree and calcined at 80 degrees centigrade. It is very less. So here we have used microwave reactors to understand how, and in the microwave reactor, we have put some camera. So to see how the reaction is taking place. So use of microwave is very good for synthesis, and there are two reasons. One is you can synthesize the particles or whatever substance at very low temperature. Normally perovskites are synthesized at 120, or if I want to synthesize titanium dioxide, I have to calcine it at 600 or 800. Instead of that, we can just do it in 60 to 70 degrees centigrade. And there is an even heating whenever we use microwave as compared to traditional techniques. In traditional techniques, there is a temperature gradient in the center towards the surface. And here, using microwave, since they can pass through the material, so the temperature gradient is also same. So here in the first diagram, this is the temperature gradient with an IR camera, and this is a normal camera which we have used. So to take the picture while the synthesis at different stages, I have given only 2 here, just for an idea. Now, after synthesis, we can see that we have covered the perovskite with titanium, because these perovskites, here I have given the what are the perovskites we have, methylamine based perovskites we have made. So in short, in scientific community, we call it MAPBI-BR2. So Ma is the organic component, which represents A. Pb is the another inorganic component, PBI, BR2, and IBR2 is the X component. So ABX3, IBR2. So here we have combined 2 halogens to form a perovskite of a special kind of perovskite. And over that we have a core shell structure, shell of TiO2, which is also mixed phase. So here we'll have 2 PN junctions with 3 materials. So here we can see in the figure, this part is the titanium part, this is the perovskite part, because lead is there and it is very heavy. And this type of structures we have made. Here also it is slightly visible. See, this part is our TiO2, and this is our perovskite. So these kind of structures we have made. I hope these are all visible. Here we can also see the lattice structure is different at different stages. So this kind of core shell structure we have made for photovoltaic application here. Next material that I would like to explain is synthesis of carbon nanotubes. Now, carbon nanotubes, graphene, and all these materials are very important in recent electronic as well as energy devices. Now, how to synthesize them? So when I started my work in Tezpur for project and all, that time there was a, I should not say a fund crunch, but okay, for a project we don't have 50 lakh rupees to buy a good CVD where I can our team can synthesize graphene and carbon nanotube. So what we did is we tried to develop a CVD of our own. Okay, and this is the most initial design that we have made in Tezpur University Department of Energy only, and I hope the same setup is still there. I don't know. And currently we have developed the setups by various folds. We have incorporated microcontroller and other controllers, and computer controlled system is there, and various other changes we have made. And we have recently applied for a patent for this, and hopefully we'll get it. It is under the process. So let me explain how to make a chemical vapor deposition if you want to make a CVD or something. So see, in case of a carbon nanotube or graphene, we need a furnace, main furnace, where the deposition or the synthesis takes place. So this is the main furnace. Normally it should reach a temperature 1200 degrees centigrade. So here you can use chromel, enamel kind of rods or coils for that, which withstand up to 1200 or 1300 degrees centigrade. Normal coils will not work because they will melt at 1000 degrees centigrade. So these type of coils can be used for the main furnace. And we have another secondary furnace which evaporates the raw materials. Suppose I want to synthesize graphene or carbon nanotube, I need a raw material or a precursor which is carbon rich. So any carbon rich material can be kept, it can be vaporized. And since we have a gas cylinder here, which is shown as number 1, regulator and other flow and other things, and we have bubblers in 2 ends to make the environment inert inside. So with the gas, when it flows, it will take the evaporated carbon material and it will get deposited here over the catalyst to form carbon nanotube. And you will not believe this kind of structure, this type of device instrument is available at that time in around 50 lakh rupees. And in Tezpur University Department of Energy, we have developed it in around 75,000 rupees. So we have collected all this thing, and we have fabricated it in 50,000 rupees. And now presently we have we have developed it further. And anyone who is who would like to synthesize these kind of materials, and they don't have plasma or other techniques which is very costly, they can have a simple CVD constructed like that and synthesize CNT. So these are some of the pictures of carbon nanotubes. You can see a long tubular structure. Okay, so this is the same image. So the surface image can be seen. You can see long tubular structure. This is TEM image. It is HR-TEM image. You can see the different atomic layers here like this. So we can identify what type of, how many layers or multi-layered carbon nanotube has been synthesized. So these are some of the work that we have already done. And coming to the next part, whenever we use carbon nanotubes in solar cells, what happens is that they are very long. So there is always a chance. We use carbon nanotubes to collect electrons. They are very good in transporting electrons. Okay, and some of these can be used to collect electrons, break the excitons. Whenever there is an excitation, they can break the excitons, electrons and hole pair, and take the electron and transport it to the electrode. But what happens, since they are very long, they short the electrodes, because whenever we fabricate a device, say organic or dye-sensitized or perovskite like devices, solar cells, so they are around very thin films of different layers we use. So it is very thin, and carbon nanotubes aspect ratio is very high. So there is always a chance that they short the device, and thus the efficiency goes down drastically. So what we thought of a means to cut the carbon nanotubes into parts, smaller parts, so that we can the shorting can be whatever they short, this problem can be resolved. Now there was a technique in Chubu University they have patented, and it is available using lasers and plasma as well as laser techniques. So these techniques are highly energy intensive techniques. So we thought of some chemical technique and found that if we use nitric acid, so it can get attached in the carbon nanotube and form epoxy group. When NO3 attaches, ultimately they form epoxy group, means COC kind of group. So when they form a epoxy group, this bonds becomes very not that very strong as carbon-carbon bond. So once they form epoxy group, we can break them throughout the epoxy group by giving a ultrasonic wave, high energy ultrasonic wave. So we can have a handheld ultrasonic gun, and we can give ultrasound to break them. And ultimately we used this, and this is another technique which we are going to patent through a project we did it. So through DST TIFAC we are approaching through for a patent here. So here you can see every nanotube is being cut into similar sizes. The size distribution is very, very good, and this technique can be used for cutting of carbon nanotubes into smaller parts. And after using this, the efficiency of the solar cell have increased many folds, that we'll be discussing in later stages. Now let us talk about photovoltaics. Now, if we talk about photovoltaics, we normally what we do is we think about silicon. So in case of a silicon, it is very easy. We have a silicon material, P-type and N-type material. The P-type and N-type material, we all know it is not same. There is a P-type and N-type. This thickness is not same. It is not kept same, and we have electrodes on the two ends, and it can be used for photovoltaic application. Now, when we talk about organic or dye-synthesized or perovskite based solar cells, it is not made up of a single material or not only two layers. There are various layers there. So first one is the absorbing layer, which produces the electron and hole pair. Then when the electron and hole pair is generated here, it is not called electron and hole pair. They generate excitons. So excitons are bound by Coulombic forces. So whenever the electron goes, the hole also travels with them. So it is very important to break those excitons. So what we use is, we use two type of material. One which is called a buffer layer of hole transport, and a buffer layer which transports the electrons or breaks the electron. Means a layer which loves electron, it captures the electron. Thus, by once it is captured, the exciton pair breaks down, and if hole is captured, the electron becomes free. Or on the other hand, if electron is captured, the hole becomes free. So two layers are there to collect electrons and holes. Then there may be other layers to back up the system, transport it to the electrode. So this is a basic diagram. We'll come to it again. And this is one of the circuit diagrams, how a PV cell, and with this we can calculate the ideal cell current and all these things theoretically. And we need, while testing, this is very important, we need a solar simulator which is rated AAA. So solar simulator is rated on three things, so and graded. So A, B, C are the three grades. So when we go for testing of solar cell, it should not say sun simulator. Sun simulator and solar simulator are different. Sun simulator is not a AAA graded. So whatever results we are getting out of it, it may not be reproducible, and it is not acceptable in scientific community. So for research purpose, we should always go for a AAA graded solar simulator. These are the three main components: a controller, the light generator, and this is a collimator where there are different what we call gratings are there, and we have a stage where there is a temperature controlled and other controller there. There are place to place the solar cell, connect it to a potentiostat from where we can collect the data. So this is a basic thing that we require for that. So in our lab, we have a solar simulator, but we also require, or to understand, because we are working in material science, so different materials behave differently in solar spectrum. So it is very important to understand the incident light to current conversion efficiency, and the quantum efficiency of the material. So for those studies, we require a IPCE QE setup, which is again costing around 45 lakhs, which is the least priced or the basic structure. And if we go for better equipment, it will be around 80-85 lakhs. So that much money was not there in with me in NEHU. So what we did, we collaborated with one industry which is based in Kolkata, and they said if we develop, they will also help in developing and framing the setup and all. And they would like, after we patent it, they would like to manufacture and market it for us. They need the rights. So we collaborated and we designed a IPC setup in our lab. So we can see this is the only this is the IPC setup. This is the stage which has got Peltier type cooler and all. We have a light source here. This is a scale through which we can increase or decrease the distance between the light sources. Here it is more clear. This is the light source, and we have a solar cell which is illuminated by that. So we have more monochromatic light as well as white light or the sun simulated light to understand or to calculate the IPC or QE setup of this. So it is developed and it is connected by a potentiostat, as I said, and data can be calculated. So this is also not very tough to make, though we need to get 3 certificates from 3 controlling agencies, which will give us whether this setup is AAA or AB, A or whatever. So this certification will be done by the company once we have developed. So this is also a setup that we have developed for understanding or to calculate the quantum efficiency of the solar cell, and we have also filed a patent for this. Next, how the solar cell operates. Now, considering sunlight, the appropriate wavelength when it strikes the active layer, we generate an exciton pair, as I saw. So the moment the exciton pair generates, we may have a electron loving material which will take the electron and breaks the exciton, as we can see. Here what we can I wanted to demonstrate is this is the work function of multi-walled carbon nanotube, which is almost minus 4.8 electron volt. And what we did is, after breaking and functionalizing, the work function has come down, and it has made easy for the holes to taken it to the electrode. So with this incorporation of multi-walled carbon nanotube in one side, the efficiency of the solar cell has increased. Now here I am just wanted to show a simple solar cell, organic solar cell that we have developed. It has got some efficiency and fill factor, everything is there. And by incorporating multi-walled carbon, functionalized carbon nanotube, a 25% increase in the efficiency has been recorded. And if we have functionalized as well as cut carbon nanotube, as earlier we have discussed, we have got an enhanced efficiency of 36.21% with respect to the cell that was earlier. So it is not the efficiency of this cell, this is the gain with respect to device A. So this much gain we have received for this. So the efficiencies are actually, it is not in percentage, it should be 6.3%. There is some typing mistake. 6.3%, it is 7.9%, and here we got 8.6% in efficiency with the incorporation of functionalized as well as cut multi-walled carbon nanotube. Now let us come to organic inorganic perovskite that I have discussed earlier. So there are different organic and inorganic based perovskite that like CH3, NH3, PbI3. This is methylamine lead perovskite. Like this, instead of I can use Br, I can use fluorine, or a combination of such materials. So it is very important before we design our setup or design our cell. It is very important to understand their conduction band minima and valence band maxima. Without this understanding, we cannot design a proper device, solar cell device. So based on this, we can make a diagram, and we can find out how after generation the electron can move. It should be staircase like of a situation where once electron is generated, it will always go towards the low energy side for electron. So, and for holes also, this is the energy side for electron, and it will be opposite, just opposite for hole. So if a electron is generated in this purple active layer, so here it is for methylamine lead perovskite, where it is IBr2, which is not clear because of that. So this is a mixed halide perovskite. So if it generated here, it will always come down to this side, but it cannot go on the higher side because it requires more energy to go there. So this kind of a structure and design we have to make before we fabricate or choose our material for that. So this is just what we wanted to say, and this is the picture of one of the organic perovskite solar cell that we have developed. These are the electrodes. You can see the teeth on the left side. These are the teeth. These are another set of teeth through which the current electrode is connected to it, and current is collected ultimately to the potentiostat. So again, I'll not go to various results and all directly. I'm coming whatever work we did. Again, these organic perovskites are being covered with TiO2, which is also mixed phase TiO2. So this type of active material we have made. TiO2 is slightly UV active, and these are visible active. So the mixed phase TiO2 show a band gap of around 3 electron volt because it has got more of rutile than anatase in it. And methylamine perovskites have band gap in the range of 1.8 to 2.2. So with these different materials, as you can show below, we have found their efficiency. So this is the efficiency versus different materials. So we can see the mixed phase, mixed halide perovskites. This is for methylamine, this is for formamine lead iodide based perovskite. So they gave very good efficiencies for us. So we can see by just covering them with mixed phase TiO2, we are making two junctions here for the material. Here also in the TEM, you can see the different materials and different structures are there. So with this, we can really enhance, and these type of advanced materials can help gaining around 20% efficiency in our lab where we don't have a clean room. I'm very sorry to say we don't have a clean room till now. We are still developing our lab, and our department is new here. So hopefully we have a clean room very soon. So, but a fabrication which is done without a clean room, we could reach 20% efficiency for perovskite based solar cells. So, which is a great result. And we have published it in IEEE Journal of Photovoltaics, which is very highly reported journal in engineering area. So let us move to the next. Next, we'll talk about what are double perovskites. So normally we know perovskite has a general formula of AbX3. So instead of A and B, we have taken cesium and titanium. And instead of X, which is an halogen, it has got 3 atoms of halogen. So here you can see we have doubled the cesium and doubled the halogen part, but we have not doubled the B component of perovskite. So these type of complex structures are known as double perovskites. Means in the two unit lattices has been merged into a single unit lattice. So that type of complex structure are known as double perovskite. But the important thing to note here is that if we are planning to have organic inorganic based double perovskite, it is not at all stable, because if we increase the amount of organic material here and fuse the two unit cells to make a new single unit cell, they become very unstable. So here only inorganic perovskites are still reported to have double perovskite. I might not know if someone has reported recently or not, but we didn't find, and we could not synthesize that type of material also, because they degrade within hours. So for double perovskite, it is purely inorganic component. So what we did is we made different materials. In place of X, we put different halogens and a combination of halogens, and these different halogens with different thicknesses we wanted to optimize. So we fabricated different thickness materials, so from 100 to 4000 for different halogen type, and we found that with increase in thickness, up to certain stage they increase the efficiency. And why we understand is that if the thickness is so very thin, like 100 nanometers, it cannot capture all the photons that is exposed to it. Some of the photons before exposure only, if it is 100 nanometers, they will pass through the active layer. So we need a optimal thickness of this active layer, so that all the photons of different wavelengths can be absorbed properly. So which is also evident from this. And for these type of double perovskites, the optimum thickness was not optimized, or no one has studied. So we have studied the optimum thickness for this type of materials. You can see we have taken different combinations here. Okay. And with the different absorbing layer thickness, we have calculated the current density, and we found that after some time the current density or the open circuit voltage comes to a peak, and it doesn't change much. So with this we can conclude that whatever optimal or thickness can be used, because if we don't use optimal thickness or very high thick material, it is the wastage of the material, as well as there will be chances of more recombination while the electron or hole travels through the electrode. So finding an optimal thickness is very important. This work was reported last year in Solar Energy Journal, and we found with this study has made a base for development of new devices based on these double perovskite for future in our research group. Now, since we are working on different types of new perovskite material, every material have different structure and different band gap. It is very important to understand the spectral response, how each wavelength is working with respect to its thickness also. So the spectral response study shows that all those materials that we have developed, advanced materials with titania as well as with perovskite, they are active in visible region, and with thickness the absorption increases, which is a common phenomena to observe. So this proves that whatever advanced materials we have made, tuned the band gap. We had two separate PN junctions for three materials that we have combined. After combination also, it is absorbing very good in absorption in the range of say 450 to 800. So this proves that the material can be used for photovoltaic application. This is also one result which have strengthened our work in double perovskite based on cesium titanate based materials, and we have communicated it in IEEE transactions recently. So there is one more way of working in perovskite. So earlier what we have used is we have changed the halogens. Now what we took is we took a separate way. Instead of changing the halogens, we kept the halogens same. And what we did is we incorporated, instead of B site, perovskite is ABX3. So double perovskite is A2BX6. So instead of B, we have put two different elements. So what happens if we change the ratio of these two different elements, how they behave and how they work? So with this type of materials also, we did some thickness optimization for different materials, and we did spectral response also. And all these studies show that this is the normal IV characteristics of different materials. I'm sorry it is not clear here, but with different ratios of AG and BI we have calculated, and we have found that if AG is 0.8 and BI is 0.2, this type of material gives the best results in perovskite solar cell with an efficiency of 19%. So we could only reach 19% efficiency in terms of these double perovskites of this particular material. So next application I would like to talk about is biofuels. So we will know about biofuels and diesel, biomethanol, how they are produced, biogas, how it is produced, what are the different raw materials required for this. So I will not go into details into it. But biofuel production using chemical technique is a very old technique. And what we try to do is by changing the chemical reaction slightly by using a heterogeneous catalyst. We are using always use a homogeneous catalyst like KOH or something, and after synthesis, separation of KOH is a very tiresome task. It requires high energy intensive process, and it is people leave it. So there is an wastage of catalyst, and also why we thought why not use a heterogeneous catalyst which can be separated out very easily. So what we did is we use barium titanate mixed phase. So here we can see there are two phases. One is single perovskite combined with a double perovskite of barium titanate, and each particle of or nanoparticle has these two materials, thus again giving a mixed kind of material, advanced kind of material, what we have made. So first what we did, we tested whether we can produce biofuel or not using this. Now the good part is using this kind of heterogeneous material, we produce biofuel which is very volatile, means it is not biodiesel kind of thing, but it is near to biopetrol, but we cannot call it a petrol kind of compound, but it is like petrol, like the characteristics. If we take it in our hand, it will evaporate in seconds. So we developed some kind of biofuel which we are trying to do. The work has stopped because of COVID. This is just 2 years back result. Though we have communicated this to one journal, published the initial in terms of letter has been communicated in a journal. So one more advantage is that the conversion efficiency using this type of heterogeneous catalyst is very high. The higher yield means about 75 to 77% increase in yield can be recorded as with respect to KOH or NOH based catalyst use. Another advantage is using this type of heterogeneous catalyst, the reaction time reduces to hours. Means within 2 or 3 hours the whole reaction is over. You can separate the glycerol and this biofuel part, and it is very fast reaction. Within a day you can produce in liters in laboratory itself. So next step was, if we have made it heterogeneous, why not introduce a magnetic shell into it, so that the separation of the catalyst becomes very easy. So what we did is we took iron nanoparticles and covered it with a barium titanate shell. So we had core shell. So you can see these are the barium, iron and barium titanate materials are there. So since they are magnetic, they always try to keep stick to each other. And this is one of the carbon based material that we have also developed for catalyst development. And we can see after incorporation of this type of core shell material, the two magnetically separable catalyst is immediately separated from the biofuel that has been generated. So thus a core shell material, magnetically separable, makes it very easy to separate the catalyst and to reuse the catalyst again. So this is one of the work that we are again trying to patent it, though we have not filed it, but that's why I'm not giving much details. We are working to develop it further. Next is photocatalysis. Now we know perovskite material or TiO2 material photocatalysis for wastewater treatment as well as for hydrogen production is a hot topic, and many various people are working, and they have achieved a lot of important discoveries and inventions in this area. What we are working is, we are working with an European group to make water for which is drinkable for a filter system. So solar based filtration system pre-filter what we are developing, and then there will be UV and other things like AquaGuard is there or something is there. But before that, we want to use solar energy to use some of the fibrous kind of structure where we will incorporate or we will deposit this type of perovskite material, advanced perovskite material. And we have already developed a reactor for this, and this is the basic shape of the reactor. We are working on it, and hopefully we will develop the reactor within 1 year or so, and a patent is also due for this. So this is various activities that we are doing at NEHU, and some of the activities I have already done with collaboration with the different universities and departments. So these are the collaborators with whom I am working with different projects. In Professor Samdarshi, S.K. Samdarshi sir is my PhD guide also. He is in Ranchi. I am working on titania based materials and development of these kind of materials with him. Professor Alexandro is in Italy, in IIT Italy. It is Italian Institute of Technology, which is top 100 institutes in world. So with him, I am developing the membrane that I was talking about for wastewater treatment plant. Professor Mikhail and Professor Michael from France, we are having a collaboration for development of double perovskite based photovoltaic material, and we would like to study the degradation pattern of this perovskite material. We know that perovskite material degrade very fast, and that is the only issue which is stopping it to bring this technology into market. So we are studying the degradation pattern, and they are working on how to stop the degradation and what are the different technologies that can be incorporated for stopping the degradation in perovskite. Whereas Mr. Dharmesh Gala and Animeg Mandal, they are from industry. Mr. Mandal has opened a he's an entrepreneur with whom I have developed IPC setup. And with Mr. Dharmesh Gala, we are developing some kind of a ink for photovoltaic system where we can just print. We are developing different inks for photoactive material. This part I have not discussed because this is slightly out of the way. So these are my collaborators with whom I am working. With this, I thank you all for your patience hearing.